Keep it moving. This lane's closed for the ceremony party. Let's go, ma'am." The voice came across the wet grass before the light did. Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale said it the way he said everything that morning. Clipped, courteous, already moving on to the next problem. He had a clock in one ear and a protocol officer in the other, and a quad full of folding chairs that had to be empty of everyone who wasn't supposed to be in it. It was 5:58 in the morning. The headquarters quad lay under a sky going from slate to the first pale blue of a clear June day. Dew on the chair rose, brass at the far edge, where the postband was assembling, catching the early light in cold flashes. The flagstaff stood bare and waiting at the head of the lawn, the halyard ticking against the pole in a small wind. And at the edge of the grass stood a woman in a gray travel jacket. No badge, no insignia. A soft bag at her feet, the kind a person carries off a long flight. She did not look like a problem. She looked like a traveler who had wandered toward the wrong lawn. Hale took her for exactly that. He was 38 years old, 11 of them in the Army, and he had run more ceremonies than he could count. He knew the shape of a clean cordon the way other men knew the shape of their own hands. A sterile lane, a reviewing stand squared to the staff. Chairs in rows you could sight down a rifle. He had it nearly perfect this morning, and the only thing out of place in the whole composition was this quiet woman, standing where the commanding general's party would walk in 90 minutes. So he told her to keep moving. Across the quad, a single bugle note lifted into the air. Morning colors. The flag detail came to life at the base of the staff, and the woman in the gray jacket stopped. Not the way a civilian stops, half turning, looking for the source of the sound. She stopped the way a soldier stops, heels together, shoulders squaring back over her hips. Her right hand came up, not slapped up, not theatrical, but lifted on a clean line to the brim of an invisible cover, fingers flat and joined, wrist straight, the whole arm forming one unbroken angle that had been drilled into her in another century of her life. She held it, eyes forward, on the flag, not on Hale. He was 3 steps into his approach when he registered the salute, and his read of her shifted half a degree, not toward the truth, but away from it. A civilian playing soldier, he decided. A veteran's wife, maybe, who'd watched enough of these to know the courtesy. He had seen it 100 times. It was harmless. It was also, this morning, in his way. "Ma'am." He lowered his voice under the music, firm now, the clock loud in his ear. "I need this lane clear. You can watch from the path." She did not lower the salute. The bugle ran its slow figure up and back down. The flag climbed the staff in even pulls, 2 soldiers hauling the halyard hand over hand, and reached the top and stood out flat as the last note faded. Only then did her hand come down. It came down the way it had gone up, slow, controlled, the cut sharp and final at the bottom, a movement with 20 years of muscle behind it. She bent, picked up her bag, and looked at Sergeant First Class Hale for the first time. "Understood," she said. One word. Too clean. The kind of word that closes a radio transmission. He half heard the wrongness in it, the way you half hear a wrong note in a song you know, and the clock pulled his attention back before he could chase it. He gestured toward the walkway at the edge of the quad, and she stepped off, unhurried, exactly where he pointed. Hale turned back to his detail. The arrival party would be on him soon. He had a lane to keep. He did not see the man on the headquarters steps. Command Sergeant Major Ezra Boone had come out the front doors with a paper cup of coffee in his hand, meaning to stand in the cool air for 2 minutes before the morning swallowed him. He was 50 years old, and he had spent 30 of them watching soldiers, which is a different thing from watching people. He had seen the woman stop. He had seen the salute go up, and he had not been able to look away from it since. A civilian renders honors with her hand over her heart, or she stands still and a little awkward, unsure what to do with her arms. This woman had rendered a salute, a real one, the kind the manual draws and almost nobody achieves, held without a tremor through the entire sounding of colors, and cut at the precise instant the music released her, and not 1 second before. Boone lowered the coffee from his mouth. He watched her walk the path Hale had given her, calm and level, a traveler in a gray jacket carrying her own bag. And the morning, which had felt to him like every other morning, began very quietly to tilt. She did not walk the path like a woman who had been dismissed. She walked it like a commander inspecting it. That was the first thing Boone noticed as he came down off the steps. Not toward her, not yet, just down into the cool of the quad to see better. Her eyes moved before her feet did. They went to the angles first, the reviewing stand and its sight line to the staff, the band's position at the southeast corner, the brass coming up, the gap in the cordon where 2 stanchions stood a hand's width too far apart. The one chair, 3rd row, sitting 3 degrees off the line of its neighbors. She read the lawn the way an engineer reads ground, for what it would do under load, for where it would fail. Private First Class Noah Strand was 19 years old and 4 months out of his first duty station's in-processing line, and he was, at that moment, losing a fight with a length of cordon rope. He had threaded it through the stanchion ring as a loop instead of a bite, and when he drew the tension, the whole post leaned drunkenly toward the grass. His ears went red. He glanced toward Hale, who had not seen yet, and would. The woman in the gray jacket reached him without seeming to hurry. She righted the stanchion with 2 fingers, pulled the rope back through, reversed the throw, and ran the line out toward the next post in a single motion that took the slack out and left the stanchion standing plumb. "Bite, not a loop," she said. "Tension toward the post. It'll hold." Strand stared at her. "Thank you, ma'am." "Square that 3rd chair while you're at it," she added, already moving on. "It's pulling the whole row crooked." Strand squared the chair. She had already moved 3 steps down the line, her eyes running the cordon the way a person counts rounds, not idly, but against a number she carried in her head. She stopped at the gap where 2 stanchions stood a hand's width too wide, towed one of them 4 inches to the left until the spacing matched the rest, and the whole cordon settled into a rhythm it had not quite had a moment before. She did not announce it. She did not look around to see whether anyone had noticed. She fixed what was wrong because it was wrong, and kept walking. That, more than the rope or the chair, was the thing that finished turning Boone's red cold. He had seen 1,000 soldiers who wanted to be caught fixing something. He had met maybe a dozen in 30 years who fixed it and did not care whether a single soul saw, and every one of them had been a person who had once held lives in their hands and learned, the hard way, that the fixing was the job and the credit was only noise. Boone, close enough now to hear, heard the words, and not just the kindness in them. Bite. Tension toward the post. Render. At the halt, the vocabulary of someone who had spent a career giving instructions that had to be right the first time, because the second time would be too late. Civilians did not talk like that. Spouses did not talk like that. Only one kind of person talked like that, and they did not usually arrive in gray travel jackets with no insignia and let a sergeant wave them off a lawn. Hale came back down the line and saw the corrected stanchion and the squared chair and the calm in the woman's wake, and drew exactly the wrong conclusion from the right facts. Competent. Squared away. Used to ceremonies. A retired senior soldier's wife, he decided. The kind who had set up 1,000 of these, and could not stop herself from fixing a crooked line. He was, if anything, relieved. One less variable. He gave her a brisk nod. "Appreciate it, ma'am. We've got it from here." "You've nearly got it," she agreed mildly, and let him keep his lane. Boone fell in beside Hale, easy. Two senior men watching juniors work. He kept his voice low. "That woman," he said. "She rendered that salute like a civilian to you?" Hale shrugged, eyes on his detail. "Vet's wife. Knows the drill. Told her to clear the lane, she cleared it." "She'd tell you her name?" "Didn't ask. She's not a participant, Sergeant Major. She's just early." Boone said nothing. He looked at the woman, who had stopped at the edge of the band's area and was watching Chief Warrant Officer Royce settle his musicians with the still, total attention of a person memorizing a face. And the feeling that had started on the steps finished arriving in Boone's chest, cold and certain, that the morning was not going to go the way the timeline said it would, and that he had perhaps 4 minutes to get on the right side of it. He did not say any of that to Hale. Hale had a lane to keep and a clock, and no idea yet that both were about to mean nothing at all. The protocol officer's radio crackled across the quad, thin and urgent. 10 minutes to the rehearsal walkthrough. Clear the area of all non-participants. The colonel's car was inbound. Hale keyed his own radio, copied, and turned back to the woman by the band, with the apology already on his face, because he was not a cruel man, and he knew he was about to be a nuisance to someone who had done nothing but help. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." He meant it. "I need the quad empty now. There's a side gate. Strand can walk you out." "I'll wait by the band," she said. "I can't have that today. Orders. The whole area has to be sterile for the walkthrough." If you have ever been told to keep moving by someone who had no idea who they were talking to, if you have ever stood quietly in your own life while a stranger decided you did not belong there, then you already know the particular stillness on that woman's face. Stay with her. It is worth it. And if stories like this one are why you are here, subscribe to Honor Tales, because this is the whole channel in a single morning. A second sergeant drifted over with a clipboard, sensing the small knot of friction the way NCOs do. He was a roster man. He asked her name, pen ready to check it against the list of participants. She gave it. He ran his pen down the page and did not find it, because it was not there, because it could not be there. The roster was a list of the people invited to welcome the new commanding general. Her name belonged at the top of the event, not on the guest list, and so, on paper, in the only language the clipboard spoke, she was a person who did not belong. "You're not on here, ma'am," the roster sergeant said, not unkindly. "I'm sorry. We'll have to get you off the controlled area." Strand had been sent to do the escorting, and Strand could not make himself hurry her. He had seen the salute. He had heard the thing about the bite and the tension toward the post. He hovered a respectful pace off her shoulder, miserable, caught between the sergeant who outranked him and the woman his gut would not let him rush. "This way, ma'am," he managed, low. "Whenever you're ready. No rush." She gave him the smallest nod, the kind that lands like a hand on a shoulder. She was not, her face said, going to make a 19-year-old's morning any worse than the morning was already going to get. It had become, without anyone intending it, a wall. 2 sergeants and a clipboard, and a private, a polite, immovable, well-meaning wall of the institution, closing by inches around a woman who had done nothing but help and decline to leave. None of them were cruel. That was the part that would sit hardest with all of them afterward. There was no villain in the lane, no sneer, no shove, just a half-dozen people doing exactly what they had been told, all of them wrong about the one fact that mattered, all of them certain they were right. It is the most ordinary way in the world to disrespect someone. You do not raise your voice. You simply decide, on no evidence, that they are smaller than they are, and then you manage them accordingly. The woman in the gray jacket had spent a career watching the institution do it to people, and she stood in the middle of it now, absorbing it, reading every face. And across the quad, Command Sergeant Major Boone set his coffee cup on the rail of the headquarters steps, squared it carefully so it would not tip, and started walking, not toward Hale, not toward the woman, but toward the band. Her name was not on the roster. It could not be. The roster was the welcome for her. She turned toward the side gate, as told, an unhurried woman doing a young man the courtesy of not arguing, and behind her, the command sergeant major reached the bandmaster and leaned in to say 6 words. The clock kept tightening, and now the clock was the antagonist as much as the man. 8 minutes, then 7. The protocol officer paced the reviewing stand with the rigid energy of a man whose whole morning would be graded on whether a controlled area was controlled. He looked across the quad and saw a knot of his own people standing around a civilian instead of clearing her, and his voice came over the net again, sharper. Hale heard it. The pressure ran down through him the way pressure runs down a chain, colonel to protocol officer to sergeant first class, and came out, against his own better instinct, as procedure. He had asked her to leave 3 times. She was still on his controlled area. He had 1 tool left for a person who would not leave a controlled area during a movement, and the tool had a name, and the name was security. He came back to her, and the courtesy was thinner now, stretched over real worry. "Ma'am, I have to ask for identification." He said it plainly. "If you can't show me ID, I have to treat this as a security issue. I don't want to, but that's where we are." She had identification. It was in the bag at her feet, a common access card and a set of orders that would have ended the entire morning in 4 seconds and left this sergeant standing at attention for the next 10. She looked at him, and she did not reach for it. "I understand the procedure," she said. That was all. No protest, no outrage, no reaching for a phone or a name or a rank. Just 5 words, delivered in that same clean, closed transmission voice. And they rattled Sergeant First Class Hale far more than resistance would have, because resistance he knew how to handle, and this he did not. She understood the procedure. She was watching him run it. She was, he realized with a crawling discomfort he could not place, letting him. It is a strange thing to be permitted. Hale had spent 11 years learning to read resistance. The chin that lifts, the voice that climbs, the hand that goes for a phone to call somebody who'll set him straight. He knew how to stand inside all of that and stay calm. What he did not know how to read was a person who simply absorbed him, who took 3 instructions and a demand for identification, and a threat of a security report with the patience of someone waiting out weather. It made the back of his neck cold. Somewhere underneath his procedure, a quieter part of him had started to suspect that he was the one being measured, and that the measuring was nearly done. He keyed his radio to call the desk. While he talked into it, her eyes were already 3 moves ahead of everyone on the quad. They had gone to the far gate, where a dark sedan was turning in off the main road. They had gone to Boone at the band, and to the bandmaster, straightening at whatever Boone had said. They had gone to the flag, 2 blocked now, and standing flat at the top of the staff against the deepening blue. She read the whole field the way she had read the lawn, sight lines, timing, the order in which things would happen, and her face gave away none of it. Strand stood at her shoulder and watched her not be afraid, and something in the boy's chest tried to make him speak, tried to make him tell Hale to ease off, that this was wrong, that you did not call the desk on a woman who rendered colors like that. He was 19, and Hale was his sergeant, and the words died in his throat. The cost of the misread had reached him too now, and it tasted like shame. The sedan stopped at the curb. A door opened. A man in a service uniform stepped out. Colonel Patrick Sumner, the garrison commander, 49 years old, and squared away to the last thread, here to do the one thing the morning's whole timeline was built around. Meet the incoming commanding general at the rehearsal, and not under any circumstances until tomorrow's formal arrival. He stood by his car and scanned the quad for a 2-star general who was not supposed to be here yet. His eyes swept the chairs, the cordon, the band, the flag, and snagged on a woman in a gray travel jacket, standing at the edge of his sterile lane, being asked, very politely, by a sergeant with a radio, to prove that she existed. Command Sergeant Major Boone reached the band's edge before the colonel had finished crossing the grass. Chief Warrant Officer Gideon Royce, 44, looked up from his music stand as the senior enlisted soldier on the post leaned in close, and what Boone said to him made the bandmaster's eyebrows climb toward his cover. "If I lift my hand," Boone said, low and even, ruffles and flourishes. 2. Then the march. Royce blinked. "Sergeant Major, who is she?" "Someone who rendered colors like she's done it through worse than this." Boone did not look away from the woman as he said it. "Tune it. Be ready. If I'm wrong, you'll never play a note and no one will know. If I'm right, you do not want to be the band that missed it." Royce turned to his section leaders and began, very quietly, to make a post band ready to render honors to a stranger. It was a small mutiny against the timeline, and he committed it on nothing but the word of a command sergeant major and the memory of a salute he had watched from 60 feet away. But Royce had spent his career making music for ceremonies, and he had learned to trust the men who had spent theirs reading soldiers. If Boone said, "Be ready," you got ready. The brass came up a degree. The drum line settled their sticks. A whole section of the morning quietly rearranged itself around a possibility nobody had said out loud. Boone crossed back toward the cordon, and now, for the first time, toward Hale. Not to overrule him, not to humiliate him in front of his own detail. He had been a sergeant once with a clock in his ear, and he knew there was a way to stop a man that broke him and a way that saved him, and he had decided which one he was going to use before he got there. "Sergeant," he pitched it for Hale alone. "Slow down." Hale half turned, radio still up. "Sergeant Major, she won't show ID, and she's standing in a sterile lane during a movement. I've got a procedure to—" "You've got a procedure," Boone agreed, "and you've got time you think you don't have. Listen to me. Whatever she is, you don't have a problem here. Don't make one." He let that sit for a half second. Ask her once more, like a man, not like a clipboard, and then wait. Hale stood caught between two forces, the protocol clock screaming in his earpiece, and the most senior enlisted soldier on the installation standing a foot from his face, telling him to hold. It is a particular kind of paralysis, and every soldier who has felt it knows it. He held. The cordon stalled, the whole tightening machine of the morning ground, for a moment, to a stop. And the woman watched the entire exchange with the flat, attentive stillness of an officer reviewing a drill she had run 1,000 times, noting who moved, who hesitated, who chose well under pressure. Her shoulders were squared without her seeming to square them. Her hands hung quiet at her sides. She was, Boone thought, the calmest object on a lawn full of nervous men, and that was the last confirmation he needed. Colonel Sumner was close now, on foot, frowning, and as he came his frown changed. He had spent the last week with a change of command packet on his desk, and in the front of that packet was an official photograph, service uniform, 2 stars, a level gaze, of the general he was about to spend 2 years working for. The face on the lawn and the face in the packet were resolving into the same face, and the colonel's stride shortened as the impossible arithmetic ran. She was not due until tomorrow, and she was standing 20 feet away, in a travel jacket being asked for her ID. She could have ended it 20 minutes ago. One word, one card from the bag at her feet, and the whole morning would have snapped to attention around her. She had chosen, instead, to stand quietly in her own arrival and let it run. And if you want to understand why a person with every right to pull rank would decline to pull it, stay with us and subscribe to Honor Tales, because the why is the entire story, and it is coming. Boone stepped back into his place at the edge of the cordon. He let his right hand fall loose at his side, where Royce could see it. Everything was set now. The band was tuned. The colonel was 3 steps away. The trap was closed, but the trap was a courtesy, and the only thing it would spring was the truth. Colonel Sumner stopped in front of the woman in the gray jacket, and the word came out of him before protocol could catch it. General Forsyth? To understand why a sergeant's careless order had landed on Diane Forsyth like a blow, you have to leave the quad. You have to go back 20 years, to a country with no grass in it, to a morning the color of rust. 2006. She was a captain then, 32 years old, commanding a route clearance company, engineers, sappers, the people the Army sent out ahead of everyone else to find the bombs in the road and open the way through. Her whole job, reduced to its bones, was 3 words. Keep them moving. Open the route. Keep the route open. Keep the column moving down it, because a column that stops is a column that dies. That morning, the route ran through a defile, a dry watercourse between 2 walls of rock, a place engineers hate because there is only one way through, and the high ground belongs to whoever got there first. She had a column of armored vehicles strung out along it in the gray light, and she was in the 3rd truck, on the net, when the world came apart. The forward blast went first, a pressure plate charge under the lead vehicle, a wall of dust and sound. Then the high ground opened up, small arms fire raking down from both rims at once, the sound of it slapping off armor like hail off a tin roof, a complex ambush, the worst thing the defile could give her. And in the half-second after the blast, she felt the column's instinct move through it like a current, the instinct of every frightened driver to stop, to hunker, to wait for someone to tell them it was over. Stopping was death. She knew it the way she knew her own name. Captain Forsyth keyed the net, and her voice came out flat and level, the only calm thing in the canyon. All elements, do not stop in the kill zone. Push through. Keep it moving. Keep it moving. She said it again and again, a metronome under the chaos, while she fought her own truck forward past the burning lead vehicle, while she called the crossload that pulled the stunned crew out of the disabled hull and into the trucks still rolling. There is a thing that happens to a column in a kill zone, and it is the reason engineers drill the one rule into themselves until it is louder than fear. A vehicle that stops becomes a target that cannot move, and the men inside it become a problem that pulls everyone else to a halt around them. And then the whole column is standing still in the one place on Earth it must never stand still. She had 11 vehicles strung through 1,100 meters of rock, and the only weapon she had against the physics of that was her own voice, flat on the net, refusing to let a single driver believe that stopping was an option. Push through. Keep it moving. Keep it moving. She made it true by saying it, until it was true. 41 minutes from the first blast to the last vehicle clearing the far mouth of the defile. 1,100 meters of road that tried to kill all of them. She took a piece of shrapnel through the meat of her left shoulder, somewhere in the middle of it, and did not notice until the morning was over, and someone pointed at the blood. The Purple Heart she would accept in a hallway months later and never once mention again. She got them out, almost all of them. Corporal Theo Brandt was 20 years old. He was a gunner in the 5th vehicle. and when a wounded driver 2 trucks up could not get himself across to the rolling vehicle, Brandt went back for him. Out of the armor, into the kill zone, against every order she was screaming into the net, because the driver was alone, and the column was leaving, and somebody had to. He got the man up and moving. He got him to the truck, and the defile took Theo Brandt in the last 30 meters, the way it had been trying to take all of them, and he did not come out the far end with the rest of the column. She kept everyone moving, everyone but Theo Brandt, who stopped so a stranger could live. They gave her the Silver Star for that morning, for the crossload under fire, for the column she dragged through a kill zone by the sheer flat insistence of her own voice. She accepted it in a small ceremony, said 4 sentences, and put it in a drawer. She has never displayed it. People who know her have learned not to ask. The medal, to her, is not an award. It is a receipt, and the price on it has a 20-year-old's name. For 2 decades, she carried that morning the way you carry a stone in your boot. Always there, never spoken. She rose through the ranks. The engineers gave their best. Major, then a battalion, then a brigade, then a star, then a second. She got very good at being calm in canyons, and the calm had a cost no citation recorded, which was that the words she had used to save them all, keep it moving, had become the words she could not hear without going, for 1 cold half-second, back to the rust-colored morning and the last 30 meters and the name. 20 years later, on a green lawn under a clean blue sky, a sergeant she had never met gave her that same order, 3 times, and did not know he was quoting the worst morning of her life. That was why she held the salute the full length of colors. That was why she did not reach for the card in the back. That was why she led a young sergeant's flawed, well-meant, by-the-book morning run all the way to its end before she would put a stop to it. Because she had spent 20 years learning what it costs to take a soldier's morning away from him, and she was not going to do it carelessly, the way it had nearly been done to her. The flag stood 2 blocked against the sky. The band's brass was up. And on the quad, the woman a sergeant had told to keep moving finally turned, unhurried, to face the colonel who was saying her rank. General Forsyth? The name hung in the morning air. But Sergeant First Class Hale had a radio in one ear and a protocol officer's voice rising in the other, and he did not parse it. Could not, in that overloaded second, hear a colonel's quiet question over the machinery of his own procedure. He saw only that the rehearsal walkthrough was 4 minutes out, and a civilian was still standing in his sterile lane, and he made one last move to fix it, the way he had been trained, the way the clock demanded. He stepped in to guide her off the grass. Courteous. Final. His hand came up, half raised toward her elbow, the small automatic gesture of a man steering a guest toward a gate. Ma'am. Last time. Let's step off the... Diane Forsyth let him. She did not pull away. She did not pull rank. Not yet. Not in the last second, when she could have stopped his hand with a single word and let it hang there as his mistake. She turned toward him instead, and for the first time all morning she smiled. Not unkindly. There was nothing cruel in it. It was almost gentle, the smile of someone who can see the next 10 seconds coming and has already decided what they will and will not cost the man in front of her. "You've run a clean cordon, Sergeant," she said. It rattled him to his boots. It did not sound like a tourist's thanks. It sounded like a grade, delivered with the unmistakable authority of someone whose job was to give them. For 1 half-second, the whole morning wobbled in front of Sergeant First Class Hale, every careful read he had made of this quiet woman, slipping a quarter turn out of true, and he could not say why. He only knew that the 4 words had come at him, the way a senior raider's voice comes at a young leader across a desk, and that no civilian wife of any retired soldier had ever made him feel, for even an instant, like he was the one standing the inspection. Across the quad, Command Sergeant Major Boone's right hand came up at his side. Chief Warrant Officer Royce saw it, lifted his baton, and his musicians came up with it as one body. And Forsyth, some part of her below thought, the part drilled in another life, squared her shoulders and settled her weight, because her body knew what 2 ruffles and 2 flourishes meant before her mind had given the order to stand ready for them. Colonel Sumner reached the knot of them at last. He saw the gray travel jacket. He saw the squared shoulders and the level gaze and the face from the packet on his desk, and the blood went out of his own face, and his spine went rigid all in the same instant. "Sergeant Hale," he said, and his voice cracked like a rifle on a quiet range. "Stand down. Now." Hale froze with his hand still half raised toward the elbow of the woman in the gray jacket. The colonel's tone, the spoken name, the band coming up across the lawn. All of it arrived in him at once, a single overloaded heartbeat in which the bottom of the morning swung open, and he stood on nothing. He did not understand yet. He understood only that everything was wrong, and that he was, somehow, the center of the wrongness. Boone's hand was up. Royce's baton was up. Colonel Sumner stood rigid at attention, and Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale stood frozen in a sterile lane with his hand a foot from the elbow of a Major General of the United States Army, a half-second from the loudest silence of his life. "Full," Boone's hand dropped. The first drum roll opened under the morning like a heartbeat made of brass and skin. The percussion rolled the first ruffle. The brass answered with the first flourish, bright and hard, climbing into the blue. Then a second ruffle, a second flourish. 2 of each. No more, no fewer. The exact honor the regulations reserve for a Major General of the United States. 2 ruffles, 2 flourishes. The precise arithmetic of 2 stars, spoken in brass, rolling across a lawn full of soldiers and freezing every one of them where he stood. Every soldier on the lawn knew the arithmetic without having to count. They had heard honors before, on other mornings, for other ranks. And the ear that has been trained on a post learns to read the number the way a civilian reads a price tag. 1 ruffle and flourish for a brigadier, 2 for a major general, 3 for a lieutenant general, 4, and 4 only, for the highest in the land. 2 had rolled across the grass, which meant 2 stars, which meant the woman in the gray travel jacket standing in Hale's sterile lane was a Major General of the United States Army, and the math arrived in 200 chests at the same instant and held every one of them rooted to the dew. And then the General's March opened over the top of it, the old melody lifting clear and unhurried into the clean sky, and there was no longer any question on that quad about who the woman in the gray jacket was. Colonel Patrick Sumner brought his hand up in the first salute. Crisp. Held. And he spoke the words that rewrote Sergeant First Class Hale's entire morning. "Good morning, General Forsyth. Welcome to your post." His voice was steady now, formal, carrying over the march. "The installation is yours, ma'am." It hit Hale in stages, and his face showed every one of them. First confusion. Why was the band playing? Who had ordered honors? What was happening? Then disbelief. For her, for the civilian, for the woman he had told 3 times to keep moving. Then recognition, cold and total, as every piece of the morning rearranged itself into a single unbearable picture. The salute held through all of colors, the precise vocabulary, the bite and the tension toward the post, the 5 flat words, "I understand the procedure," that had rattled him because they were the words of a commander watching him work. And finally horror, pure and absolute, as the full size of it landed. He had told a Major General to keep it moving 3 times, and reached for her elbow to walk her off her own parade ground. He came to attention so hard and so fast it looked like it hurt him, and his salute went up, shaking. General Forsyth returned Colonel Sumner's salute. Then she turned, unhurried, to Sergeant First Class Hale, and she returned his too, evenly, fully, without a flicker of edge or punishment in it. A clean salute, exchanged with the man who had tried to throw her off the lawn, while 2 stars worth of honors rolled over both their heads. She did not speak over the music. That was the thing the whole quad would remember. She had every right to cut him down, to name his error, to make the morning into a lesson with him as the example. She did none of it. She stood at attention under her own honors and let the band finish. Let the general's march run its full length into the morning. Let the honor be the honor and nothing else. She had learned a long time ago, and at a terrible price, that the loudest thing in any canyon should be the one that saves people, not the one that shames them. Private First Class Noah Strand stood at rigid attention at the edge of the cordon, with tears standing in his 19-year-old eyes, and he received in that minute the thing he would carry and tell for the rest of his life. That he had watched the general, the cordon tried to remove, return the salute of the boy who could not make himself rush her. The last note of the general's march settled over the quad and faded into the small wind off the flag. Diane Forsyth lowered her salute. She looked at the sergeant who had told her to keep moving, at the rigid spine, the shaking hand, the face gone gray with the understanding of what he had done. And she spoke for the first time since the music had started, quietly, just for him. "At ease, Sergeant," she said. "We're not done." The honors were over. The quad began, slowly, to breathe again, the protocol officer frozen by his reviewing stand, the band lowering their instruments, the colonel waiting at a respectful distance. And General Forsyth took Sergeant First Class Hale not to the woodshed, not to the front of the formation to be made an example, but 3 steps to the side, onto a quiet square of grass, where only Boone and Sumner stood close enough to hear. She did the hardest thing a senior leader can do. She praised before she corrected. "You ran a clean cordon, Sergeant," she said. "The lane was sterile. Your chairs were squared. When you had a person you couldn't account for on a controlled area during a movement, you asked for identification. And when you didn't get it, you moved to treat it as a security issue. That is exactly what the regulation tells you to do. By the book, you did your job this morning." "Ma'am," Hale's voice was barely working. "I told you, 3 times. I told you to keep moving. I reached for—" "You told a person in civilian clothes to clear a controlled lane," she said. "That was your job. Look at me, Sergeant. He did. Here is the lesson, and it is the only one. A clock got into your ear this morning, and it made you stop seeing. You had everything in front of you, the salute, the words, the way I read your lawn, and the clock made you deaf to all of it. The procedure was right. Your eyes quit. Don't ever let the clock win twice." Hale held himself rigid, taking it, and what was in his face was not the resentment of a man being humbled, but the wide-open attention of a man being taught by someone who had earned the right to teach him. And then she gave him the rest of it, quietly, only to him, in a voice the others could not quite catch. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "because you're going to spend 2 years wondering, and I would rather you didn't. The worst order I ever gave was keep it moving. I gave it in a place a long way from here, to people I was responsible for, and it kept almost all of them alive, and the almost has a name I carry every day. So when you said it to me this morning, 3 times, it landed somewhere you couldn't have known about. That was not your fault. You didn't take anything from me. and I am not going to take a man's career for the sake of my own ghost." She let that settle. "You're mine now, Sergeant Hale. You're going to be the best cordon NCO on this installation, or you and I are going to have a very different conversation. Do you understand me?" "Yes, General." It came out of him like a vow. "Yes, ma'am." She turned then to the edge of the cordon, where Private First Class Strand still stood at a trembling brace, and she stopped in front of the boy who had not been able to make himself hurry her. "That hesitation you felt this morning, Private," she said, "when your sergeant sent you to walk me out, and something in you wouldn't let you rush it. You know the feeling I mean." "Yes, ma'am," Strand whispered. "That was judgment," she said. "That was your gut reading a situation faster than your roster could. Keep it. Don't ever let anyone train it out of you." She looked over at Boone. "Sergeant Major, I want this soldier's name on the board for the leadership development track. The instinct he showed this morning is the whole job. We can teach him the rest." "Already done, General," Boone said, and the smallest smile moved under his gray mustache. "Put it on the board the second the band came up. I've been doing this a long time, ma'am. I know what the right instinct looks like when I see it twice in one morning." What that morning showed, what the whole quiet length of it had been building toward, was the oldest truth the uniform carries, and the easiest one to forget. That real rank does not need to raise its voice. It does not need to win the argument in the lane. It can afford to wait, to be told to keep moving, to let a young sergeant finish being wrong, because it knows exactly what it is and has nothing left to prove to a clock. If that is the kind of story you came here for, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay for the next one. The quad emptied by degrees, the chairs would be reset for tomorrow, when the arrival would be done again, properly, with the general in her uniform and the band playing on cue, and a sergeant named Hale running the cleanest cordon the installation had ever seen. But that was tomorrow. This morning, Diane Forsyth shouldered her own bag. A young aide hurried up to take it from her, and she waved him off gently, the way she waved off most things that were unnecessary. And she finished the walk she had come a day early to take, alone, unannounced, the way she had always walked a new command before it knew she was there, to see it as it really was before it arranged itself for her. There would be time in the 2 years ahead for the post to learn the rest of her, that she ran a command the way she had run that defile, calm and exact, and unwilling to let anyone freeze in the bad ground, that she remembered the names of privates, that she had a drawer somewhere with a silver star in it that she would never show anyone, and a reason she would never explain. They would learn it slowly, the way a unit learns a commander, by watching what she did when she thought no one was counting. This morning was the first lesson, and only 3 people had been close enough to hear it. She crossed the quiet quad to the flagstaff. The colors stood out flat against the clean blue sky, the halyard ticking softly against the pole. She set her bag down at her feet, and she brought her hand up one more time. Slow, exact. A salute no clock was timing, and no one had ordered her to render, and held it to the flag for a long moment in the empty morning. She had told a column to keep moving once, a long time ago, and lost a man doing it. This morning she had been told the same thing, on a green lawn under a kind sky, by a sergeant who meant no harm, and she had chosen, for the first time in 20 years, to stand still. She let the salute down slow. She picked up her bag, and Major General Diane Forsyth walked into the headquarters of the post that was now hers, with no fanfare following her and no hook waiting ahead, just the quiet and the work and a morning she would keep. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.